All right, everybody, how you doing? Welcome to the Blue Chip Podcast by fans for fans. This is your host Cody Potter. We're going to do a pod that I really didn't feel like doing, but we're going to talk about this Terry McLaurin contract situation. Man, I was really going to just wait until he got signed. Apparently, the gods are not going to let me do that. So let's give Terry his due. Let's do this conversation, man. We're going to put on many hats today. So let's get started with this, man. Terry McLaurin yesterday requested a trade. Let's just as fans, man. Let's not jump off the edge yet. Let's really get into what's going on with this. Okay, so we're talking about a player that's definitely earned his money. Everybody knows he deserves a raise. Let's talk about the contracts that are coming around the league, and then let's put the GM hat on, because realistically, man, it's very easy for us as fans to be like, oh, well, Terry's always been a team first guy. You got to pay him, or you get mad because he's trying to do the best thing for him, and it hurts because you want him to be a part of this team, and he's doing things that are best for himself. So now he's not a team first player. Okay, let's be real. Terry is a team first guy. He is a captain of this team for a reason, but at the end of the day, this is his last big contract. So we got to do the thing. He's got to do the thing for him that's best for himself. Now, this also involves agents and things like that, and I think that's where the biggest gap really is in this. Adam Peters is going to do the best thing for this team, okay? Because he just traded for Laramie Tunsil, okay? He traded for Deebo Samuel. He traded for Marshawn Latimer. You're going to have other vets come up. Last year, Sam Cosmi got signed, right before December. In San Francisco, we know that Adam Peters always kind of took, with John Lynch, of course, being the GM, but Adam Peters being involved in all the football decisions and things like that. We all know that these contracts take time. Okay, so let's talk about the wide receiver position. The position is blown up, the contracts or whatever. So let's think about this logically, okay? So who leads the pack? $40 million contract, that was Jamar Chase. How long did it take Jamar Chase to get this $40 million contract? It took him over a season. He played a full season of football while he had an offseason prior to last year, to this season getting paid, and it dragged out into this offseason getting paid. So to get that $40 million contract, it took over a year. Justin Jefferson, over $30-some million contract, 35, 36, I think, average AAV, $36 million contract. Well, we were talking about that after his third year in the league. Played that third year on the same contract, went into the fourth year, had the fifth year option picked up, all these things. It took over a year to get that contract done. CeeDee Lamb, over one off season, over a year of playing football, got his $35 million plus contract. Okay, so what's really holding this deal up? I'm gonna put on a couple little clips just to get this thing going, so you're not always watching me this whole time, because y'all really don't care to see me. So I'm gonna do a little highlight for Terry. But as you guys watch Terry, man, I'm gonna keep talking about this. So Terry is the heart and soul player of this team. Terry is that dude. We all love Terry. Terry deserves his deal. But Terry is also older than all these guys that are getting these contracts. So as we talk about, the biggest holdup for it is the DK Metcalf contract, okay? Well, bad teams give bad contracts. I'm not calling the Steelers a historically bad team. It's very crazy the way that they've been running this team over the last couple of years compared to historically how we talk about the Steelers. So we're talking about an average AAV of $33 million per season. But if you look at the guaranteed money, which is really all that matters, it's really 2 years for $60 million. So the guaranteed money, or are we talking funny money? Because in the last year of DK's contract, that's where the money really is higher. Well, is he even going to get to the last year of the contract? Most of the time it's not. And by the time he gets to that, he'd probably have to have 4 productive years just to get to that last year to make it an average annual value of $33 million a year. It's actually closer to $30 million a year for the guaranteed money and the real money that he's guaranteed to see in this contract. So again, this is where I think the disconnect is. This is where I think the agent is telling Terry one thing. I think the feelings around the league are another. I'm sure there's definitely teams that are interested in Terry McLaurin, but are they interested in giving up a first-round draft pick plus a $33 million contract for a 30-year-old player if they're looking long-term to actually have feasible, building their roster and actually going to build around him? Well, are they going to win in the next 3 or 4 years? Is a team going to trade a first-round pick, or, the value of a first-round pick, a second and a third, or, a second and a future 2, or whatever the value is for Terry McLaurin, that the Washington Commanders are okay to say, okay, we're willing to let you walk, and the team's going to part ways with $33 million a year AAV on their cap Are they going to be in the Super Bowl in the next 3 or 4 years? That's the thing that the other team has to look at. Because if you're trading for this player, you better be going to the Super Bowl. Because Terry doesn't want to go to a team that's going to lose. I mean, or does he? Does he really want to go to a team that doesn't have a chance to go to a Super Bowl for $33 million a year, or would he rather take $30 million here? This is where you got to put your GM cap on. And this is where you really got to think about it. And this is where Terry McLaurin ultimately has to make up his mind, because he requested this trade. So we're going to keep talking about Terry because it's come to this point. So realistically, the last 4 off seasons, we've had players request trades. We've had T. Higgins request trades. We've had Brandon Ayuk request trades. We have Deebo Samuel here that has requested a trade in a contract standoff. And now it's Terry McLaurin. None of them players got traded when they were in their contract standoff. It took down to the wire. Of course, 2 of those players were on the same team where Adam Peters came from. Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel is now in Washington. He's going to probably want a new contract next year. So this is where you have to put on your GM hats. This is where you really have to think about the business of this. So what did Rashawn Slater just sign for? 141 over the, crazy contract, but he reset the market for offensive tackles. Well, you got Laramie Tunsil coming up next year. Laramie Tunsil is going to go off of that Rashawn Slater because realistically, Laramie Tunsil is probably going to have the best season of his career. We're going to be competitive regardless of whether Terry is on this team or not. This team is still going to be probably playing playoff football. Are they going to be as good without Terry McLaurin? Hell no. There's not a question. Nobody's questioning what Terry McLaurin brings to this team. But you're also thinking about, well, Terry McLaurin on this team, you're probably looking at another chance at going to the NFC title game, at the very least, with the improvements that this roster has made. So you're negotiating with Laramie Tunsil next offseason off of being a team that's coming in, that's contending. He's going to want the Rashawn Slater type money. He's going to want the Penny Sewell type money, the Lane Johnson type money, all the money for the guys that are getting paid these big contracts at left tackle. Left tackle contracts are bigger than wide receiver contracts. So we're talking closer to $35 million a year. So you're paying Terry, if you do pay Terry $33 million a year, then you're negotiating with Laramie Tunsil, which is going to be $35 million a year. Then you're talking about Deebo Samuel, your number 2 that you just traded a 5th for. Now, off of the draft pick compensation, that's the guy that you paid the least for, but he's going to have a hell of an impact on this team as far as a runner, pass catcher, things like that, all the things underneath. And now you're giving Terry McLaurin that number 2 option, and that wide receiver room is going to get very, very expensive. So you can't just say, oh, well, we're going to pay Terry McLaurin, we're going to pay Laramie Tunsil. Eventually, you're going to start backloading your contract, so when you do pay Jaden Daniels, you're really tearing down the depth of your roster, and you do have to look forward, because eventually when you pay Jaden Daniels, you're going to be paying Mikey Samerstill. Everybody can tell just off of the first year and a half of Mikey Samerstill, dude, I'm telling you, this guy is going to be a dog. This guy is going to be commanding big money. Then the year after that, you're talking Trey Amos, another cornerback contract. The cornerback contracts are going up. We're talking big money. Josh Connerly Jr. By that time, you're probably talking about the Laramie Tunsil contract coming off of the books. But again, you're going to have to find a replacement for that in the draft. So you're going to be looking at offensive tackles, and these offensive tackles are expensive. So even if you do get rid of Laramie Tunsil's contract, you're talking about Josh Connerly's contract coming up. So that just evens itself out. So you have to think about these things. You can't just say, oh, well, just pay Terry what he wants. Just pay Terry what he wants. Yes, as fans, emotionally, we want to pay Terry what he is due. He has earned the money. But dude, $30 million for AAV for a 30-year-old plus player, I'd give it to him. But there's a certain way that you're structuring that contract to give him that money. So by the time that Jaden Daniels and other guys are coming up and hitting their cap on their contracts, you have to be smart about this. Like realistically, if I'm working, Terry's got 1 year left on his contract. So what I'm doing is I'm padding the number up this year. I'm front loading the shit out of this contract. Give him the AAV of what he wants, but most of that money is going to be added into this upcoming season, the season after that, and honestly, by the time the second year of this contract, which will be the 3rd year from now, the 2028 season, that's where all the guarantee money is pretty much going to be coming off for me. So yes, I'm going to front load the shit out of this, but I'm going to give him the number that he wants. It's as close to it as I could possibly get, and that's going to be probably around $29-30 million for Terry. At a certain point, man, Terry requested this trade because we're not coming up to his figure. You're going to let Terry probably go around just like the Niners did with Brandon Ayuk, no team, no, yes, they're going to be willing to part with the money that Terry wants to pry in from the team, but then you add to it the draft compensation that they're going to have to give up to get Terry. Teams aren't going to want to do it. Just like last year with Brandon Ayuk, just like the year before that, just the year before that with Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins last year. Like, dude, like, yes, you want to pay the player the money, but when you have to give up draft compensation for him too, and then the draft compensation for that player, the player that you could ultimately select with that draft capital, that's a cheaper player. That's a player you're developing. That's cheaper for that role. So if you pick a second round wide receiver, dude, his contract overall is $8 million, not $30 million average annual value. So you think about it from that standpoint. It's like, yes, we would give Terry McLaurin this money, no questions asked, for another team, but the average annual value is what's really going to affect it in the draft compensation, and the value of that pick is what makes it so difficult to make these trades. That's why these players, when they do request a trade, they start looking around the league. They start looking to see what their value is around the league. Yes, it's not that the team isn't willing to handle the money. It's that they're not willing to handle the money plus the average annual value of the contract that comes with it. And that's what makes these trades so difficult. That's what makes these contracts so difficult, is the player says, man, I'm valued at this, man. I see these contracts going out, the Garrett Wilsons, the Jamar Chases, the Justin Jeffersons. I might not be asking for Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase type money, but I want to be paid what DK Metcalf is being paid. But then, like I said earlier, you start breaking down the actual money in the contract, the guarantees in the contract, and it's structured very differently from the CeeDee Lambs. It's structured very differently from the Justin Jeffersons and the Jamar Chases. So again, when you think about the real money, the guaranteed money, again, that's all about structure. That's what makes these contracts so hard. It's what makes these off seasons so hard, getting into this position. So ultimately, Terry, I still believe it to this day. I was not trying to do this podcast. Today's podcast was supposed to be about yesterday's padded practice, but again, I owe it to Terry to have this conversation, and honestly, I'm hoping this really is the last conversation that we're having about this. I do not want to talk about Terry being traded. I do not want to talk about any more distractions with this team, not with all the good faith that this team has really accumulated over the last year and a half, man. It just sucks that we're in this position, but when you have a player that feels he is worth X, you have a team offering Y, what does it take to get to Z? And the deal getting signed, the trade getting done, whatever the end result is for this team, man, it's a lot of things that really come into this, man. Like when you're scouting players, you got to look at it from a coach's standpoint. You got to say, man, what is the skill set for this player? How are the coaches what is the formula that we're playing? What is the system that we use? Does this player fit the system? And then what is his skill set? And does he transcend the skill set, or does he just fit to the skill set? That's how you determine value of a player. Terry McLaurin to this team, he transcends the system. He can do everything you ask of him. We haven't even maximized, I feel like, whatever since Terry McLaurin has been here, what he offers and brings to his team. You can watch this guy make yards after the catch. You can play him deep. He has good enough functional speed. He plays above the rim, bigger than his size. He's a leader on and off the field, which is something that you can't even scout. That's something that just, comes naturally to who he is as a person. You want to pay Terry this money. He is worth every cent, but you got to find a number that works out for the team, that works out for the player. And it just really sucks that the communication has gotten to this point. And I think that's where the agent really comes in. The agent's probably putting bad things in Terry's ear, like, oh, we can get you this 33. We can get you this 33. Maybe it's just saying with this team, they should be coming up to you. They know the value of you on and off the field, but they're only talking about your age, only worried about your age. And that's why these things get so personal. That's why we're at this point. Ultimately, again, let's come off the ledge a little bit. We're going to get the reports. We're going to have all these things. But as fans, we got to just be patient. Just be patient. The contract disputes come to this point. Like, do you think the Bengals don't like Jamar Chase anymore after a year and a half of going through the contract situation with him? No, they still love Jamar Chase. Does any Vikings fan did they have any resentment towards Justin Jefferson for how long it took for him to ultimately get his deal and all the off the field things and reports and things like that came off? No. Brandon Ayuk, maybe, with all the tweets and all that. I don't know. I'm not a San Francisco fan. I don't know. All I know is last year, the fact that he was tweeting Jaden Daniels constantly, like it was just such a weird situation with the Brandon Ayuk thing, and then he comes in and tears his ACL and MCL this year. That makes it a very weird situation as far as that goes. But honestly, I don't think there's any resentment there. The player got done. Ultimately, they welcomed him back. And then honestly, he didn't really produce to the level that you were expecting. I don't expect that with Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin's going to come in here after he signs this deal. He's going to get right to work. He's going to pick right up where Jaden Daniels left off. The team is progressing. They've been doing their thing. I expect nothing but Terry McLaurin to ultimately come in here and produce and be the Terry that we know and love. And the results will speak for themselves on the field once the deal is done. Getting to that point, yes, it's been a headache. Honestly, like I said, I did not want to talk about this pod. I really didn't want to have to put on the GM hat. I didn't want to have to put on the scouter's hat. Really, I'm just so entrenched with training camp right now that honestly, this is just a headache for me to talk about Terry McLaurin. But we love Terry McLaurin. We owe it to Terry McLaurin to do the due process, to talk about him, give him his shine, give him his props. Like, we know what he is on and off the field. And again, he is worth the contract. Nobody is disputing that. Don't let whatever has happened cloud your judgment to say that Terry McLaurin is not worth the money that he's seeking. Does he get the number he's ultimately seeking? No. That's the thing about negotiations, man. A good negotiation means that the team wants to give X, the player wants Y. Ultimately, Z and the contract that they're signed for, they both feel like they lose because the team came up and the player went down. That's how a good contract negotiation goes. And just ultimately, when we get to that point, we're going to get there. And we're going to be doing all this again next year. Hopefully, we aren't dragging it out with three different players, man, when it comes to Marshawn Lattimore, Deebo Samuel, Laramie Tunsil. I would expect Laramie Tunsil maybe to even get signed in season at this point. Maybe he's the one that does drag out next year. Maybe you lock up Marshawn Lattimore when you see everything that you need to see from him to get that deal done early so you can just have it out of the way. So when you're looking into next offseason, you're talking about Deebo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil, you can kind of get them deals working the best way that you can. But trading assets for players, you know you're going to be paying them big-time contracts. That's the thing about making these trades. You're not just trading for the player, you're trading for the average annual value of the market that you're going to be paying that player off of. That's why trading for veterans is such a tricky kind of situation. Yes, you want the instant results. You want to build the overall talent of your roster, but they come at a cost. The draft picks that you would ultimately select those players, the draft pick that you would ultimately be selecting, the player that you would be bringing in would ultimately be cheaper. So it's either easier contract, the markets are set, it's an easier thing to do. Well, making all these trades, the Terry McLaurin contract, the Laramie Tunsil contract, the Deebo Samuel contract, the Marshawn Lattimore contract, eventually you can't pay all these players. Well, we're not at that point. We will have the cap to do so, but it makes it tricky. You have to pick and choose because when you get to the Jaden Daniels contract, you have to be able to know that you're going to be paying over Patrick Mahomes. You're going to lock this dude up for 10 years. You're going to 7, 8, 9, 10 years. You're going to be able to have cap flexibility to be able to restructure that thing as that thing goes. Like, this is going to be a one-of-one contract, just like the Patrick Mahomes contract. So you're saying you've got to structure these deals for these vets that you brought in so you can compete on the rookie window. You have to be able to set yourself up to be able to compete on the second contract window. And you see teams doing it. You see teams like the Eagles and, the Chiefs and all these teams, they're competing in the second window. The Lamar Jackson, the Josh Allens, they're still competing in that expensive window. But it's because they're structuring the contracts. You can't pay everybody. That's why this Terry McLaurin contract is so important. It's critical. The Laramie Tunsil contract, again, is going to be critical, especially when you see the Rashawn Slaters and all these guys and the figures that they're making, man. It's really, really hard to make all these contracts work and then structure them in a way so when you are paying the quarterback and you're paying all your other players that you've been drafting and developing to take over this team in the leadership positions down the road, it's very complicated. So yes, as fans, we want to pay Terry. Ultimately, again, like I say, I know I'm just sounding like I'm just repeating, but we will pay Terry. But I think it is going to come to this point where he's going to get some feelers around the league, see what the contracts are. Maybe that helps the negotiations speed up a little bit. But like I said, when it comes into the draft compensation and what we're willing to let Terry walk away from, I don't think anybody's going to meet that price. That's also willing to meet the average annual value for the contract that Terry is seeking. That's where I think the team gets from X, the player gets from Y, and we get to Z. So that's the Terry McLaurin deal, man. I thank you guys for really stepping around, man. I like to talk about these things in the offseason, not so much when training camp is in because I'm dialed into football. Football's back. We're excited. We had the Chargers game last night. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I know it's preseason football, but football is back. So, again, didn't really like to put on the all-season hat. I like talking about these things during the draft, talking about these things during free agency. I didn't really think we would get to this point, but we are to this point. But Terry, like I said, Terry deserves it. I don't really have no problem doing it. It's just not a pod that I really like to do for this team. It is kind of cool having these type of problems being a contender. But Again, I think it gets done. Thank you guys for checking out the pod, man. This is the Blue Chip Podcast. It's your host, Cody Potter, signing off, man. Have a blessed day. Peace.